This is the news and talk of Nevada. Now, Nevada Outlook, a discussion of Northern Nevada issues with Monica J on News Talk 780 KOH.
I'm so glad you decided to join us today, and a show I've been wanting to do for a long time, and really there is no more appropriate time than now to do this, and that is having a very special guest who's been on the air with us before, but not in long form like this, and that's Joey Walker, owner of Leading Edge Mitigation. Joey, welcome to the program. Thank you so much for taking time out of your very busy schedule and doing this.
Well, thanks for being here as well.
We, of course... Everybody knows about the shooting that happened recently at a local school, and it gets your mind working. You know, were we prepared? There's so many things to talk about. But first off, I want to know, what is Leading Edge Mitigation? Leading Edge
Threat Mitigation is a company that I started several years ago, and the premise of this company is to teach people how to protect themselves before, during, and after a particular event that may threaten their safety. It could be anything from personal safety while you're shopping, while you're traveling, personal safety while you're going out on a date, personal safety while you're being at a mall, at a movie theater. It could be a sexual assault awareness. It could be something from teaching people what to do if they're about to be mugged, or if they're in a shooting, or the scene near a shooting.
It's crazy how things happen, because originally I had wanted to talk to you, and we were going to give holiday tips and, you know, talk to you as we got closer, people out with their bags and everything. And we are going to do a segment on that in the program today towards the end. But since the shooting has happened now, let's talk about active shooter situations. You know, this is no surprise to this country now. We've seen it for decades. When something happens, people, you know, there were the old jokes about the post office and, you know, people going postal and people just on top of buildings or something. First off, what is an active shooter situation?
An active shooter is a person or persons with a firearm in a public or private place in the act of killing people.
What is their motivation for that?
You know, their motivation could be a number of things. It could be because they are psychotic. It could be because this person has a lose-lose scenario or situation or point of view in life where something has happened to them and they are taking a loss personally or professionally, and they want to make other people feel their pain as well. It could be something from a relationship breakup, where the person decides to shoot the person or people involved, or it could be someone from a situation where the person feels picked on or decides to enact revenge for whatever the reason.
So somebody's personal life, whether it be losing a job, breaking up with a girlfriend, just in today's society, could literally be the end of my life.
Could trigger an active shooter. That's absolutely correct and unfortunate.
It's always going to bring up the subject of gun control. Mm-hmm. And, of course, we always put out the statement, it's not about gun control, it's about control. You know, that's what all of the issues are. When we're talking about an active shooter situation, is it just smart for everybody to carry? Have their own personal protection?
No, because if you're not properly trained, and even with the training and learning how to use a firearm and learning how to shoot a firearm, comes the knowledge of when to use it, and lastly, the will to use it. Because if you don't have the will to use it in a situation to protect your life or someone else near and dear to you, then the shooting that's going to take place is not going to put that protected person, or the person who has the firearm, in an environment where they're comfortable using the firearm.
Well, not too long ago, especially, you know, we look at the gentleman, Bob Sperry, who was killed in the bank. Mm-hmm. You know, if somebody had a firearm in the bank, could that have been a worse situation had they decided to take action?
It could have been, because, you know, back in the 70s when I was a young rookie officer, one of the things that we heard about were bank robberies, that the bad guy comes in and it's obvious that he's the bank robber. So he's in the course of his committing the crime, and you think that you're going to be on the inside and you see this person and you decide to take your weapon out and take on the bad guy. Well, we started seeing individuals that were coming into the bank to act as cover or diversion for that primary crook. So you take out your bad guy to take on number one bad guy, and what you don't know is number two or number three bad guys standing directly behind you with their firearm ready to take you on.
Is it a different situation, though? Say if you're in a restaurant, there are children, there are families that, you know, in a bank, I hate to be callous, but they're insured.
Exactly.
It's, you know, somebody goes into a bank, let them take the money.
Exactly.
And even bank tellers have the bank says, let them go.
Exactly.
Don't let anybody get hurt. Just give them the money.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what about when you're in different situations and you're with your family and you're, say, at a restaurant or just at an event for people?
Let me give you a scenario. Let's say I'm with my family and we're sitting in a restaurant. and the guy comes in and he wants to hold up the restaurant, and I'm in a position to see this guy commit the crime, I'm going to allow him to commit the crime and leave. I'm going to be the best witness I possibly can be. I have my family with me, so for me to intervene at that specific moment in time is putting my family and everyone else's life in jeopardy. If this person were to start shooting inside the facility based upon my actions of intervening, then I've endangered everyone. So let this guy commit his robbery, and if that's what he's after is just the money and the goods, he's going to walk out the door or run out the door, and I'm going to let him go, and I'm going to be the best witness I possibly can be. However, changing the scenario, he goes inside, commits the robbery. Then after the robbery, he begins to shoot. Then, and only then, I take out my weapon and shoot the bad guy.
We've had people before be in situations like that, and, you know, it's come out afterwards. People love to armchair quarterback once it's all said and done, don't they? That people have had CCW training, but that doesn't necessarily train you for an active shooter situation like this.
That's
your
correct.
Your CCW training.
That's correct. And again, the bad thing is that when a person has just obtained their CCW, they're thinking, I'm now armed, I can go anywhere with this weapon, I can protect, well, within reason, within laws, and I can protect myself, and they feel that they have this red S on their chest now. They're Superman or Superwoman, and they have a duty to protect the rest of the community. And I disagree with that, in that if you don't have the knowledge on how to pull this weapon, if you're not used to pulling a weapon on an individual, holding them at gunpoint, or potentially shooting them, or shooting to stop the individual, then you're going to be at a detriment, and you're going to be hesitating, perhaps, and you're going to put yourself and others at greater risk because you don't have that will and the ability to do that.
So it seems like any time something happens, you just see the number of CCWs just spike.
Climb, exactly.
Climb, especially if terrorist attack, anything like that. What should people do if they decide that they do want to be prepared for situations? Once they get their CCW, then where do they go from there?
Well, the best thing that they can do is to continue their training with a legitimate or reputable service that provides information and tactics on what should happen in an active shooter situation. And one of the things I specifically teach and train on is I remember a specific scenario where this guy talks about something that happened to him in a mall. He was in a mall, and I believe this is in the northwest area of this country, and the individual witnessed a person coming into the mall with an automatic firearm, with specifically a semi-automatic weapon, an assault rifle. And he approached the individual. He was armed at the time, CCW, and he told the kid, put your gun down. The kid shot this guy. That victim is now paralyzed. He's able to talk about it, but because he approached the shooter, he didn't have to. He had an opportunity to escape. But he approached the shooter, identified himself, told the kid to put his weapon down, and the kid shot him. So would he have been better by escaping? Yes, because then he saved his life. He would tell you, oh, I think I'm in a better situation now because at least I did this. The kid gave up eventually without any further harm to anyone else, but look at what it cost this individual. So the best thing he could have done, one of two things. One, you're not there to save any individuals. You're not there to put this red S in your chest and go through them all trying to find out where the shooter is and to neutralize the shooter. That is not his job. His job is to escape with his family, people who are near and dear to him, and take the people with him that he possibly can. Not to go search for the shooter and not to attempt to neutralize, and definitely not to identify yourself and then get shot by the shooter.
Well, it seems like people don't even know, really, I think, when you're in an active shooter situation, and we've heard it many times in witness statements, that what a gunshot even sounds like in a room. If you do recognize that you are hearing a gunshot, what is the first thing that you do?
First thing is determine, and I'm going to assume that no matter where you are, if you hear a gunshot, the first thing should be to divert all of your attention, your undivided attention, to the sound and to confirm that's in fact what you heard. If you even think that you really heard it, you should be taking action on it. Because typically our minds go to the point where we justify things and go, oh, that's not what I heard. Maybe I'm just hypersensitive. And you talk yourself, exactly, you talk yourself out of it. But if you really confirm in your mind or act on that information, the first thing you should have done is to already have a pre-planned escape route. If you are not there, you can't get shot. So you leave the facility, whichever means you can. We're in this room here, and if I heard a gunshot, the thing I'm going to be looking at is if I have to go back towards the door and the gunshot's in that direction, I'm putting myself at risk. But there is a window that leads directly to the outside. So the first thing I'm going to do is decide how I can break that window and then how I can escape. Not to go looking for the bad guy.
Okay. What about getting down onto the ground?
Well, you can get down and get
because
low as possible.
Because I hate to tell you this, if something happens in here while we're in here, you can't get through that window. It's double paned, locked down, it's soundproof, and that's pretty much it.
Exactly. And there's some glass that, when you walk into a room, the first thing I do is I try to look at the glass and determine, is this one chair or two chair glass? Which means am I going to take one chair to get through this glass, or is it going to take me 2 hits to get through this glass? Second thing I can possibly do is if I can't escape the location, I'm going to use one of 2 options. I'm going to hide specifically to try to conceal my identity from the shooter, or I'm going to hide so that I can ambush the shooter when the shooter comes to my location.
Oh, okay. There's so much more to talk about. Please stick around. We've got Joey Walker, owner of Leading Edge Threat Mitigation, with us today, and we're just going to get as much information out of you as we can, Joey, to not only protect us in our day-to-day lives, but when we're out shopping, when we're at work, when we're on the school grounds as well. All right, we'll be right back after this.
This is Nevada Outlook on News Talk 780 KOH. You're listening to Nevada Outlook, the Larry Kudlow Show, today at 3 on News Talk 780 KOH.
So glad you decided to stick with us today. My guest is Joey Walker. He's the owner of Leading Edge Threat Mitigation. And, of course, with not just what goes on here in the community, but what you see go on across the entire country and throughout the world. There are threats out there. This is a different time. I'm not dating you here, Joey,
right,
but from when you and I were kids, this is a completely different time. And people have to be, I don't want to necessarily upset and paranoid and, prepare for the worst, but you do need to prepare for anything that could happen.
Exactly.
How do you prepare, though, when someone snaps?
Well,
and can you identify those people?
First of all, there's no such profile that you can use for a school shooter, specifically a kid. Because I've talked with people who are experts in the field, people who've worked through the Secret Service to actually interview school shooters. There's a doctor in this community who has done extensive work and written publications on school shooters. And with her work and being able to talk with her at length, finding out that there's no such thing as a profile for an active shooter, specifically a school shooter. And people don't just snap, because if they just snapped, then they would just snap without all the preparations of bringing everything with them. But in these cases, we often hear the individuals who are active shooters who bring 1, 2, 3 weapons to the scene, hundreds of rounds of ammunition. Improvised explosive devices, edge weapons, which are knives, things that they are ready, prepared to do battle, bulletproof vest, as in the case of the movie theater. This guy was body armored up, gas mask. He's ready.
He was ready for it.
He knew the date, the time, the location, and everything he needed to have with him to commit that specific crime he brought with him. So if he had just snapped, just all of a sudden psychotic episode, he's going to do that, and he probably wouldn't have all those things with him. But he's able to prepare himself to gather all of those things, to gather hundreds of rounds. And who's watching that? I mean, look at the case in Carson City, where this person went off the deep end, supposedly. This person was psychotic, had a mental problem that was identified, not just by his family, but other people within the community, and was able to still gather all the materials that he needed to commit that crime.
What is it about us in our society that we're not reporting people who have these mental conditions?
Sometimes they do report them. However, the system can only do so much. There's a legal 2000, which means that the police can take an individual into custody and take him to an area hospital, and the doctors determine whether or not that person is a threat to himself or others. The doctors determine. So sometimes, even if that individual is lucky enough to be committed to a psychiatric facility, they're there for a certain period of time and evaluated by physicians that are at that facility to hopefully get that individual back into the mainstream. They're not going to warehouse him and leave him in that facility and just medicate him for the rest of his life or her life. Because, by the way, active shooters can also be women. That they're going to bring this person back into the fold of society. Then they're going to hopefully depend on that individual taking his or her medication religiously every day, however it's prescribed, to keep them from acting out. So even when we do report them, the system does what we can do to bring them back into the fold of society. Because if you took a particular person and thought, this person's going to be a threat to dangerous to society, and lock that individual up, wow, we should be building a lot more jails and mental institutions.
So are we not reporting family members? Are we just too soft on this issue? Or
sometimes we do report family members, but again, when they report them, what is the system doing as well? And the system can only do what we've allowed the system to do.
Okay. And usually that boils down to money.
Yes, unfortunately.
Do you think that, I know this is off the topic, but do you think that enough money is spent on mental health issues here?
I worked in a mental health facility years ago, like way back in the early 70s, and I can tell you that, no, I don't think we're spending enough money.
Okay, former law enforcement, you've worked with mental facilities, and I can totally see now why you've gone into threat mitigation, because I have a feeling you kind of saw this coming through what made you think that?
I looked at people when I responded to certain crimes as a law enforcement officer, and I got to rise to the rank of lieutenant. And so going to oversee major crimes at a specific location and seeing a common thread of the victim has some reasonable things they could do to prevent the crime that they didn't foresee, and if they had taken these steps, they possibly could have avoided becoming a victim of a crime. And I saw that so many times. I'm thinking, why don't people see this? It's so obvious. So if we can teach people what to do to reduce themselves being a victim, then there's a lot less victims out there.
We saw our shooter not too long ago in Walmart. Okay, we've seen shooters in banks. We've seen shooters in schools, office buildings. How do you prepare a plan when there are so many different scenarios out there?
There has to be at least two different types of plans that you'll see. You'll see an institution or a facility plan. And those are the best laid plans of mice and men, unfortunately, and they cannot think of every situation that are out there. But they're going to try to think of some very in-the-box conventional thinking of what they can do to mitigate or prevent or respond to a specific type of emergency, whether it's a fire, whether it's an earthquake, whether it's an active shooter. And those plans are usually thought about and brought about by management officials to be able to respond to those situations. However, if it's an active shooter in that facility, and the active shooters can be internal or external. Let me explain. An internal person is a person who is either working for the company, a person who's a former client of the company, someone, let's just say this radio station. So you've got a former employee, or you have an individual who has brought things in the facility who may be a contractor. And an external client or an external situation could be a spouse. It could be a boyfriend, girlfriend. It could be someone who doesn't work for the company but is somewhat familiar with the company and knows where the location is. So with those types of situations, if you have an active shooter situation and it's an internal threat, that individual knows the company plans. So they're pretty much compromised from the start. They would say, and let's just say your company plan says, okay, if there's an active shooter, we're all going to escape through the east door, and we're going to rally across the street in the parking lot next to the flagpole. Well, if your shooter is on the inside, it's an internal shooter, an internal threat, they know that as soon as the shooting starts inside the building, everyone else is going to run through the east door, go across the street, and rally at the flagpole. So where do you think, Monica, the shooter's going to go to next?
The east door.
Exactly, and across the street to the flagpole. So the internal policies sometimes work, but we have to be thinking, who is the shooter? And if I think that the shooter possibly might be a person that may be an internal threat or knows the specific rally point or even could guess the rally point, then I'm not going to go to that location. I'm going to have my own personal protection plan. Now, so we teach kids and we play with them when they're young to play hide and seek. Have you ever done that with nieces and nephews and things like that, or young children? Have you done that?
I do it actually still.
Exactly. And, being around young kids, everyone loves to still play hide and seek. And kids have to find the best place to hide. And when you count from, 1 to 10 and the kids running around, they're looking for a hiding spot and they're thinking, no, that's not a good place. No, that's not a good place. Oh, here's a great place. And they find that location. Well, why can't we do that in places that we go to? You use your work. You could go through your work and take you 15 minutes a day just to say, if I'm in this corner of the building, if an emergency happened and I had to shelter, this is a great hiding place, but this one over here is not, based on all the things that you think might not be qualified. Or you go into a restaurant, and as you walk into a restaurant, most cops sit with their backs against a wall where they can see who walks in the front door. That's just something that's taught within us for officer safety, human nature. So they pick the best places for cover. Where are they going to hide? Where are they going to step into? Where are they going to step behind so that they can hopefully have a place to shoot from if an emergency arose? So we play those hide and seek games no matter where we go. We can go to the mall. When I teach classes, I talk about, okay, let's pick a mall. And in this case, we pick the closest indoor mall, and we think, if we're at the food court and the shooting started, where would we go to? Here's the location of the shooter. Which escape do you use? So I would tell them, first, you hear shots, you confirm that's what it is, you get low to the ground, first thing. And if others are standing around you looking at you, wondering why you're down on the ground, if it's truly a shooting, then hopefully they're going to figure it out pretty soon, or they're going to be potentially a fatality. So next, we've determined where the shooter is. Where's our next exit? If we are down behind something where we can stop or block bullets by that object in front of us using cover and concealment, we want to be able to hide from the bad guy, and we want that object that we're hiding behind to stop or block bullets. Then we're going to try to scramble as quickly as we can, even if we're on all fours, to that closest exit. And then once outside, we're going to run as far as we can and put a different building between us and the shooter. A whole different building. So let me just run out in the parking lot, stand right next to your car going, "Phew, wow, that was really horrible." No, you keep running, because that other building's going to keep you safe. It's going to put some distance between you and the shooter. So we want to take a look at those things and have people thinking, so that the next time you go to the mall, you're going to be looking at that when you're in the food court thinking, Or if you're at Starbucks, or if you're at your local church, if you're at your library, if you're at your local fast food restaurant, no matter where you are, if you're at work.
But now am I paranoid?
No, because you have to have those protection plans just in case. The last thing you ever want to do is, when the situation happens, to start thinking and trying to come up with the best answer at that moment in time.
Yeah. Stick around. We've got more of this great information from Joey Walker, owner of Leading Edge Threat Mitigation, right after this.
You're listening to Nevada Outlook. Mark Levin, weeknights at 9 on News Talk 780 KOH.
As we continue on with the program, Joey Walker, my guest today, owner of Leading Edge Threat Mitigation. And Joey, I hate that we have to build this into the show, but with the shooting at school, it seemed to be the hot topic in the mission once Columbine happened. And the schools were being mapped out. They wanted to know where every nook and cranny was, and they were being videoed. And so there was always something there, information for law enforcement. But then you never really heard anything about that. How do you plan for a school shooting? Is that still something that is actively done within the school district? And
you'd have to talk to the Washoe County School District Police Department and their administration to determine whether or not what they've actually done. So I'm not at liberty to actually discuss that one. But I can tell you that there's protection plans, again, for yourself. And again, looking at the institution, they're going to have a protection plan. The thing you must be able to do is to improvise. And I would strongly encourage each parent, specifically that has a child in school, that at the beginning of the school year, you have the opportunity to bring your kid to school on a daily basis, especially if they're elementary or middle school. High school is kind of a little bit far out there. I think if you walked up to your high school with your kid in tow, and they'd kind of look at you and exactly, they're going to feel embarrassed. Yeah. But elementary and middle school, perfect opportunity to bring your child to school, go inside, look at the classroom, look at the environment that you're walking your child into, look at the playground, and then have those discussions. And I remember, again, talking with my children when they were going to middle school and high school and suggesting, hey, guys, I understand the facility may have a plan, but if you are in this situation and something were to happen, this is what I expect you to do. I remember specifically counting out numbers of sides so that the school front parking lot and front doors would be a certain number, and then the next number would be going clockwise around the building.
Okay.
So that I could tell them, go to the number 2 side.
Because I don't see parents doing that.
No.
I mean, you're special. You're former law enforcement. So I think your kids were raised in a different way. My mother was in law enforcement. So I look at threats. But, they're kids. It's school. It's being with their friends and learning. And do we have blinders on?
We have to have a different mentality today, because these things are much more common. And kids have turned to guns much more often than they have in the past. And if you look back 30 years ago. I mean, school shootings is not a new phenomenon. It's occurred basically. If you were to look at the very first school shooting, you're going to find that there was one back in the 1700s. So it's not just a phenomenon that's occurred today. It's been going on. It's just more frequent today. And if we look at active shooters in movie theaters and all of the sorts of places that are in public. Some places in private you can go to parties. I mean, we had a party near the University of Nevada area where a guy walked in, and how many people were shot? Yeah. So an active shooter could be at a private location as well.
Parking lot of the baseball game.
Exactly.
And we look at things across the country, and I mean, do we tell ourselves, though, that it doesn't happen here?
We do, and I think every community has that same kind of mentality where they think, well, it's not going to happen here. It couldn't happen in this little place because this is a little town, or we don't have the same craziness that happens in large metropolitan cities. But, you expect a crime like that happened on last Monday to occur in some large metropolitan city, whether it's Oakland, California, Los Angeles, New York, Chicago, Atlanta, Dallas, Texas. All of those places are large metropolitan cities, and I would say that they probably happen, but maybe you don't hear about them as often. Or they happen in little towns just like Reno, too. So no matter where you live, you should have some kind of a plan that, if something happens, this is what I'm going to do.
Well, I was talking with a friend not too long after the shooting, and that was the thing. It's like, okay, well, look at Chicago's numbers, or, school districts in those bad neighborhoods. It's like, this is not something that is new. It might be new or not very often here. I got a hard question for you.
Sure.
Ultimately, whose responsibility is it?
Responsibility for what? Let me ask that specific question.
The safety.
I think you have to spread it. I think you have to say the facility has a duty and a right to keep an individual safe while they're at that facility, and they need to do what's reasonable, because the courts will most likely look at in a civil litigation, what did you know, when did you know it, and what did you do about it? So from a civil perspective, being sued later, the courts are going to ask you, okay, Monica, let's just look at this building here. The person who's ultimately responsible for the safety of this building is whom? You would say that person is. And when that person ends up getting sued, they're going to have to show up to court with their attorneys, and they're going to ask those questions and have to be able to prove or not from information that they have and the evidence in their side versus evidence on the other side. Okay, what did you know about this particular threat? Well, I knew that this, and this happened, or had the potential of happening. Okay, when did you know about that? Well, I knew about it on such and such a date. Okay, what did you reasonably do about it? And if they say, well, I put up a sign next to the door and said, you can't bring guns in here, or I told people that, be aware in the parking lot. Well, is that really as reasonable as you could have been, or could you have done more? So the facility. Now let's go back to the person individually. I would feel remiss as a parent if I didn't try to warn my children and my family members, here's a potential threat. If this should happen, here's what you need to do. Mm-hmm. And even though the facility that they're going to be in, whether it's at a school, whether it's at a business, you still need to understand that that business may not do everything. And they're going to look for the more conventional ways. And sometimes it's going to be out-of-the-box thinking that you have to do in order to enhance your plan, because sometimes the shooter is going to learn based upon past shooting events. They may have heard about a shooting that happened in another jurisdiction, and they go, wow, that guy brought with him an IED. He brought a pipe bomb.
So there's evil out there.
Exactly.
Someone's going to say
So I'm going to bring 2 of these. I'm going to bring extra weapons. I'm going to bring a gas mask. I'm going to bring this. I'm going to bring that. So they're learning from past behaviors of other shooters. So if we're looking from a conventional standpoint, our shooter will do A, B, and C, and they protect themselves in an institution plan to do A, B, and C. What happens when the shooter does D? And if we're going, well, we're sure that the facility thought of this. No, not necessarily. They can only do what they expect and what's reasonably done for that facility. I did a class for a specific school district on active shooter. And I got so much resistance from other people that said, within that district, that said, well, you can't show them how to do this. You can't talk about this. You can't talk about that. So basically, my presentation was limited by almost a third of the material that I could have given them, because they felt their people weren't ready to hear that.
That's the ultimate question. Aren't kids supposed to be kids? Why should we be saying that, hey, you're going to school and one of your friends could bring a gun to school and try to shoot people?
And what do you do about it? I mean, let's go back before the shooting were that prevalent. And then we were hearing about kids that were at other kids' houses and, hey, let me show you my dad's gun. And they pulled it out and they started playing with it and boom, it goes off and another kid's shot. I'm sure we've all heard stories about that in just about every jurisdiction. So I told my kids early on, hey, if you're at a house and someone pulls out a gun or talks about pulling out a gun, you leave. You don't think, I'm going to stick around and watch what happens. I tell my students, if you're at a fight and people are fighting, leave. You don't stick around to watch because these days people pull out guns and shoot each other. If you're at a nightclub and a fight breaks out, you need to leave because people sometimes go out to the parking lot, get their gun, or go home, get their gun, come back, and shoot the place up.
Parents used to think that when their kids went off to parties, the big thing was drinking.
Yeah.
Well, now you have to think about other dangers
exactly.
that they could be involved in. There's no easy answer, is there?
Unfortunately, no.
What would you encourage people to do, parents, especially that it seems you have to hit or strike when the iron is hot, when something happens? What should parents be doing right now?
They should be talking with their children about a personal protection plan, something that they feel is reasonable and age appropriate for that child. You don't have to make it so scary. And again, talking and being around young children, I've had the opportunity to teach them, this is what you do in a situation where you may have to escape. And guess what, boys and girls? Here's what you need. Now, you don't make it so scary like the bad guy's going to come in with a gun and he's going to do this. But hey, guess what? Sometimes things happen. And let's play this game, kids. I'm going to tell you, be quiet. I'm going to motion with my hands. Shh. And then the kids are going to look at me and then I'm just going to point to a certain direction. So I have a certain motion, a circular motion with my hands to include everyone in the specific area. And then I'm going to point to a direction. And the kids would obviously quiet down and they would hide to a location that I would point. And that's inside a classroom. And I've had success with second grade classes up through.
A lot has been said about kids' minds are developing. They're still growing. They're still thinking. I think back to the Old West and how this country was started. And you had 12 and 13-year-olds who were married and having kids. And, times have changed from them. They knew how to handle guns. There's no easy answer.
No, unfortunately. And even though you can talk about responsibilities, there's a mental mindset that children aren't, their minds aren't really fully developed because of the prefrontal cortex until the mid-20s. You could look at that and you can, proponents of that,
I think we need to give them more credit than they get, than they deserve. Yeah. Look at all the child celebrities out there. They learn how to run lines. They mature. When you open up and you tell them realistically what, could happen, what could become, even going to school, I think that they pay attention.
I think so, too. And if nothing else, it's in the back of their minds. So, and again, with my children, and they'd look at me, and after I've described the danger and the potential of what could happen and then what they need to do, they kind of give me oh, Dad, come on, really? But then hopefully in the back of their mind, it does stick. And if an emergency does happen, they're able to go, Dad told me this, now I'm going to do this.
All right. Stick around. We're going to wrap up the show with Joey Walker, owner of Leading Edge Threat Mitigation, right after this.
News Talk 780 KOH.
I really don't want to wrap up today's program, and I want it to go for hours more because there's so many things that we haven't covered. That's because we're talking with Joey Walker, owner of Leading Edge Threat Mitigation. And here we are going into the holidays, and that's always one of the hot topics, Joey, is the fact that you're out, you're having a good time, you're buying things for your loved ones, but there are also the people out there who this is what they survive on. The criminal activity of going out and taking from you, and they feel that that's enhancing their lives. How can I, as the consummate shopper, be out there enjoying myself, but be safe at the same time?
Right, and you have to recognize that sometimes people get into shopping overload where they're just so consumed and I've got to buy this.
Talk to my husband.
I'm going to buy that. So you have to look at making safe transactions because people, if you put yourself in the mindset of a criminal, he's going to be looking or she's going to be looking at you while you're making that transaction. So what kind of things are you pulling out of your huge purse? Are you going to come out with lots of cash? And if that's the case, then you're a candidate for getting knocked upside the head when you go out to a location. So using your debit card and having that card in your back pocket as opposed to having it in a huge purse so that you can whip out your debit card or your credit card and swipe away and then type in your little secret PIN code with your fingers concealed as you're typing in your PIN, if that's a PIN number that you need to use, and then moving on. And when you're taking your goods out to your vehicle, using the buddy system, having other people with you, because it's going to make your shopping trip a lot more fun. Look what I'm going to get to buy. I get to buy this. I get to do this. And you're two people together walking out. The more you have the safety in numbers, the less likely you are to being attacked by a violent criminal who wants to rob you. But people also make the mistake of walking out to their vehicle to offload all of their store-bought goods, open up the trunk, throw it in the trunk, or throw it in the back seat and throw a blanket over it. Oh, if they can't see it, even though there's this huge lump in the back seat, obviously the criminal can't see it, so they won't do anything to break in your car.
The invisibility cloak.
Exactly. If you need to really do that, put the goods in your car, put them in your trunk, put them in some place where they can't be seen, and drive your car around to the other side of the mall. Because if the criminals are sitting there watching you as you're walking out, then obviously they know to, as soon as you put your goods in your trunk and you walk away, they just pop the trunk with a crowbar or some other kind of tool to do that with. You put them in your back seat, they smash the window, take the things out of your back seat. And I don't care how much security you have in the mall parking lot, it only takes a few seconds to break into a car.
Yeah. I was shopping the other day and a lady asked me if I wanted help out, and I'm like, oh no, I can handle this. But during the holidays, I mean, do you just get kind of embarrassed to ask, oh, can security walk me out? I mean, will they do that?
Some people do, but then security may be overloaded, and you should never, ever depend on an entity protecting you. You got to take care of yourself because they can't be everywhere for you. I'm not saying they're incompetent. They are very competent in most cases. However, they can't be there all the time, and they're always going to go to the higher priority kind of situations.
Right. Let's go back to, this is just good general information for any time. For people, whether they're shopping during the holidays or just, out shopping. I mean, it's no big deal. But what about keeping our schools safer, keeping our kids safer all year long, and utilizing law enforcement that is retired? I mean, in talking with you, you retired at, to me, an early age. Why don't we get some of these people back into the schools?
I don't think that's really been discussed. I don't think that's really been thought about. And I think that should be a topic of great discussion, especially now. We have lots of cops that are out there retired from every jurisdiction, whether it's from California or from Michigan or Nevada. And bringing those guys into the fold, every police agency has to go through certification throughout their state to be qualified to be a police or a peace officer. So bringing those guys back in, creating a position through the local or the state legislature to give the legal authority for that individual to carry a firearm on a school campus, and then giving them the power to be able to do so, as well as compensating them. Because a lot of cops, when they retire at a young age, trust me, I've talked to lots of cops who are just sitting around at, okay, I'm bored now. They've been retired.
You still got a lot of cop left in you.
Yeah.
A lot of safety left in you.
So they're bored, or they're thinking, I really need a purpose to live for, because before they retired, they were always on the go. Now it's kind of, wow, okay, now what do I do? But they've gotten their fill of the humdrum every day, responding to take the burglary call, responding to take the lost property call, responding to confiscate the found bicycle, responding to confiscate whatever mundane thing that they have been doing for 20, 30 years. But they have now an opportunity to interact with children and to keep them safe at the same time. So you could bring in those individuals, bring them into the fold, have a great discussion with legislature, a great discussion with the school district, and get those individuals to support the local police department. These are officers who are already trained on how to use a firearm, already trained on the use of deadly force, already trained and already have proven practice of, unfortunately, drawing down on deadly force threats and knowing when to shoot, where to shoot, how many times to shoot, all those types of things. So it's a great I think, resource.
Well, and it seemed like the immediate thing was going, let's arm the teachers, let's get them the training. And it's like,
I disagree with that.
Got
because
that resource right there.
Exactly. You're arming teachers, and not every teacher's used and comfortable to carrying a gun. And the last thing we want to have is that teacher who's not used to carrying to put that gun in a situation where now a kid can pick it up.
So retired law enforcement, you're there.
Exactly. And these are guys and gals that have been wearing guns for 20, 30, 40 years.
LeadingEdgeClasses.com, 843-0936. Learn how to protect not only yourself, but the ones that you love as well. Joey, thank you so much for coming in. And just one last quick question, only about 30 seconds here. lady was complaining there was a 13-year-old shot, and he had a pellet gun. She said, 13-year-old kid, how did the cops not know that he was just a kid with some issues?
You don't know. And we've proven now that even 10-year-olds can pull a trigger.
And kill. All right. LeadingEdgeClasses.com. Find out more for yourself. Joey Walker, owner of Leading Edge Threat Mitigation, thank you so much for coming in today. And
thank you.
You didn't scare us, but you gave us a lot to think about.
Oh, good.
Have a great day and learn to protect yourself. I'm Monica J. 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 And learn to protect yourself. I'm Monica